Where am I looking? To you, to whoever's asking the question?
I mean, this is the main camera, but you can...
Yeah.
Okay, but to whoever's asking the question.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
right.
Oh, but yeah, we're ready.
Yeah, you're ready?
Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, David Ellefson, to our podcast, our videocast. Everybody knows David Ellefson, of course, rock legend, bass legend, currently on his Bass Warrior tour. David, I read in an interview once that you are a musical warrior. What's that? How would you define that?
I think so. You know, a warrior doesn't always win, but a warrior goes out to win, you know? And I think I love the Japanese adage, you know, that, you know, fall down 7, get up 8, you know? And most of life, especially at this point, is about how many more times you get up after, you know, after a battle, you know? And a battle can be, I don't mean it to always sound like it's war, but it's effort, you know, to write the songs, make an album, go out and promote it. You know, years back, those used to be 12 to 18 to 24-month tours. You know, sometimes today it's just the process of writing the songs, recording it, securing the record deal, putting it out, doing the promotion. That in itself can be a year to 18 months. And I think with the Bass Warrior Tour, what we wanted to do is try to be inclusive of, you know, certainly some Megadeth songs that I was a part of in the past. And I tried to pick some things that I was a writer on as well. And also some of the solo material, things that me and Annie Martin-Jelly have done a lot of work together between Ellefson Soto, our no cover record that we did during COVID. So it's a pretty broad, you know, base of a lot of material that we have to choose from. So I think it's, you know, as a warrior, so to speak, it's sort of the all-encompassing, you know, 40 years of my professional career since I moved to California at age 18 in 1983 and fired it off and got the professional career started.
I'm a huge gearhead.
Okay.
I'm a guitar tech. I'm into your love guitars, love bass, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to be covering a lot of ground sound-wise with this tour.
Yeah, you know, as far as the gear goes, you know, honestly, it's right here, you know. It's here and it's here. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, my rig has always been very simple. You know, I tried years ago doing this biamping, triamping, compressors, limiter, all this. And I was like, just get this shit out of the way. You know what I mean? Just get it out of the way. I hate for gear to tell me how to play. You know, I'm very expressive in how I play, and that doesn't necessarily always mean high volume. You know, you learned years ago playing in orchestra band on saxophone and playing in jazz band as a bass player, you know, with the music, the conductor screaming at me and the orchestra like, you know, dynamics, you know. So that's not always easy in a loud rock and roll band, a thrash metal band, because things are usually turn it up and it stays there, you know. But to play with dynamics is a big part of it. So to me, the gear, you know, I have my Jackson basses out here, 5 strings, just because most of the songs, there's a lot of 5-string songs. So rather than change, I don't like to change back and forth because the string spacing screws me up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to adjust mid-show. So I'd rather either play all 4, like I do on Kings of Thrash, or play all 5, and then it's just comfortable, you know.
Okay.
But my wireless system is, you know, I use a Shure system. I've got my Harkey, the LH1000 heads, the high drive 410 cabinet. You know, and really a cabinet is just something to put a microphone on to get a tone. You know, I always take a DI, a direct to the house, but I really prefer the tone of the microphone in my in-ear system. And I've been using this X-Vive in-ear system, which is kind of a common, it's kind of a new trend in the in-ear stuff, especially for these kind of venues and stuff that we're doing where you're not carrying a full audio pack with all of the in-ears for the whole band and everything, which is, you know, it's a whole rack, it's a whole thing.
That's massive.
But yeah, it's expensive, and for a bigger, you know, kind of tour where you're playing, you know, arenas and theaters, you would do that. But for what we're doing here, where it's a lot of kind of cabarets, clubs of kind of 500-600 seats and below. The X5 is great. It's you know, everything is now these days is, you know, you charge it with a USB, you know what I mean, and it's
you get to go.
Yeah, and I love it, and it's convenient, and it works great. It sounds fine. I've got some Ultimate ears from years back. I don't even know where I got them. You know, probably from my Megadeth days years ago. But I just carry them in my gig bag or my travel bag with me, and I pull them out, and they sound great. You know, they're probably some simple little 2 or 3 drivers. You know, I've learned with the drivers in these in-ears, you know, you can get these 5 and 6 and 7 drivers, and you know that more drivers doesn't necessarily make it sound better for this type of music.
I always thought more drivers means better frequency range. Was it like that?
It can be, but it can also take away the punch. You know, I had a company in Gdansk, Poland, make me some in-ears last year that are real good. And I learned as I was auditioning which ones I wanted that the more drivers can also soften the sound.
Oh, really?
Like
I didn't know that.
maybe for like, you know, for a softer kind of music, maybe, you know, an R&B, something like that, where there's a different dynamic. That can be fine. But for playing, you know, pretty punchy rock and roll, 4 or 5 drivers is plenty. It's plenty. Because it keeps the mid range. You know, it's kind of like what I discovered when I was toying with this biamping and triamping and all this stuff back in the '80s. Because I owned all the PA systems for my bands and stuff in Minnesota, and you know, that to have this nice, clean, pristine sound, it got very transparent when you got a bunch of guitars and drums in the room as a rock band. And that's why people use an SVT. They use, you know, a bunch of, like I use the 410s. It's fine for this, you know. But I'm not a fan of the digital stuff.
Yeah,
you know,
I figured.
I'm really not. Every band I'm in, it's like we have cabinets and we put microphones on them.
Yeah, that's the way to
and
go.
speakers are moving air and pushing into the microphone. And,
So
and
the
I know
old style.
it by today's standard, it is old style. But you know, there's a sound. I mean, that's what I grew up with. I like that sound because it's very visceral and very. To me, it's a real sound. You know,
you can feel it up on stage.
well, digital it's like you know, it's like AI. It's artificial intelligence. I want real intelligence. You know, give me real intelligence is what I would prefer to have.
Did you hear
know?
what Joe Walsh said about AI?
No.
He's not worried about AI as long as AI isn't able to trash a hotel room.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think for those of us that grew up with that style. You know, we just prefer it. There's, you know, to me, especially as a bass player, I like something, even though, again, you got in-ears in, so I'm not really even hearing the amp so much. And even on, you know, bigger festivals and stuff, you're not really hearing the amp. It's just mostly, it's creating a tone, a sound, right? But there is something about it moving air, you know, and that air moving, just like in the line arrays of a PA system, you know, that's what thumps your body, you know, and it hits you and it moves your body. So I think and that's still an analog process.
It is, yeah.
You know, so I think that is a big part of what connects the music to from us creating it to the listener.
Yes. Look, I want to spice things up because I don't want you to have to be going through the same interview you did a couple of times. So look at this. I found this yesterday actually, and thought you might like this one.
There is the Garnet BTO Special. It was made by a charming eccentric named Gar Gillies in Winnipeg. Gar Gillies was a sound engineer and musician.
Okay.
He worked with the Guess Who, among others, and all the local bands in Winnipeg. The Guess Who transformed into the Bachman-Turner Overdrive in the 1970s.
It's true. I mean, that right there is what sold me on the whole thing, right?
Bachman-Turner Overdrive were known as BTO in the US. And this amplifier, the BTO Special, according to Gar Gillies, was not named after the band Bachman-Turner Overdrive. The BTO stands for Big Time Operator.
Right. That was kind of the That was where that came from. That was it's like TCB, taking care of business,
Yeah,
right? That was
exactly.
on the Elvis plane, right?
No, I saw this video yesterday. That was Steve Albini, by the way,
Okay.
a magician in his own right. And I figured I'd bring you something, a little present from me to you. There you go. You probably
See,
have
now
this on vinyl.
this is where it all started, right here. Because these pictures on the back are basically of that video, right? That's like the live footage of, in fact, when I got this, I mean, I used to look at this in the store, right? In fact, the original copy, thank you for this, by the way.
Of course.
The original one actually had a raised, like you could feel the gears and
Oh,
you could
yeah.
feel the box. And then when I opened it, I went to my friend John's house and he had a copy of this and I was just mesmerized. And then you open it, and of course, as you open these records of this day, you know, you get the gatefold.
Right.
You know, and as I don't know, a 10 or 11-year-old kid, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Of
I didn't want to be a
course.
fireman or a policeman
right.
anymore, right? Now I want to be this, right? That looks fun. And in fact, the Rickenbacker, the 4001, you know, that was a sought-after bass for me. I finally got one, a red one. But yeah, I mean, this was it, you know. And in fact, I actually bought a copy of this at home just so I could read through the liner notes, you know. And now I understand, you know, the writing, BMI. Okay, I'm a BMI writer. You know what I mean? So I know some of this stuff myself, and the studios, and I even know who some of these people are that were part of this. Bruce Allen Management, of course. But you know, so there's these things that, to me, as you're listening, you know, talk about, again, the analog organic experience, right? You're listening to this. There's a needle. It's spinning. You can hear the dust on the needle.
The crackling.
And, yeah, crackling away. And you know, you're sitting here reading through this, studying these pictures. You know, I think for me and musicians like me, that was a big part of this process. You know, with these records like this. So yeah, I went from here to Kiss Destroyer, then probably over to Van Halen.
Yes.
And then maybe Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, the first Boston album. I mean, that was that was the trajectory of my musical life growing up. So thank you for this.
Hey, of course, you're welcome.
Good to have one of these handy.
Yeah, man,
Thank
you
you.
can play this one to death, so that's fine.
That's great. Thank
You
you.
always get to one for collecting, one.
Of
so
course,
you can
of
play.
course, yeah.
So sticking with the bass theme, I took a deep dive into your Instagram, and I found this.
Oh
This
yes,
is you, 12 years old, back in.
that's me.
Was
With
it
my
Minnesota?
my dog Skogmo coming up
Skogmo?
on the dirt pile. That was out on the farm, actually. Yeah, I went up to take a picture and the dog came up. I was like, may as well keep the dog in the photo.
I just wanted to ask, what happened to that bass? Where
You
is
know, I was wondering the same thing. So, you know, on the back of the Kiss records, it always said, Kiss use Gibson guitars and Pearl drums because they want the best, which of course we now know is an endorsement, right?
was.
We give you equipment or give you discounts on equipment, and you put our credit on the album, right? So that bass, my mother, I found it in a local newspaper of a town about a half hour from where I grew up in Minnesota. We went over, we bought it, $150. It had flat lawn strings on it, and disappointingly did not sound anything like Kiss Alive. You know, I was like, I mean, it was a great sound. It had a nice sound, but you know, that EBO had that one pickup on it, right? So it was this.
neck precision?
Yeah, it was a very, you know, and to me it was a muffled bassy tone, right? There's another version of those EBO, the EB3, et cetera, that had another bridge pickup back there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people recorded. Tom Scholes recorded the Boston records, I think, with one of those. Bob Daisley recorded a lot of his Ozzy records and stuff like that with that. So it had, that pickup added that more nasally, punchy tone. But I had that bass, and then my father bought me a Dan Armstrong acrylic bass. You
Oh,
know,
no
the
way, the
see-through
Lucid one?
Yeah, yeah. One of the original ones that came out, and it was very funny. It was heavy. It did not sound great because the acrylic doesn't resonate. You know,
Okay.
it's. But I enjoyed it. It was a 24 fret neck. It was fun to play.
And the original ones even had a rosewood bridge, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. Exactly,
Rosewood
it did.
Bridge,
Yep.
Rosewood
We found it
Saddles.
at a local music store in Sioux Falls Music, which is a neighboring town about an hour from me in South Dakota. and so yeah, he bought that for me. He thought it was cool, so he bought it for me. You know,
It
so
is a cool looking bass, 100%.
then I think I traded that Gibson EBO. There's a local music store in Jackson, Minnesota. Ironically, where some years later, I would eventually have my Ellefson coffee
Yeah.
shingle at Cat's Hog Heaven. It's a popular barbecue restaurant there. But that used to be a music store called Lusk Music, and they had a red Rickenbacker 4001, and it was interesting. You know, that bass is that Gibson is very unique because it has these what they call the violin tuners, where
Yeah,
they didn't stick up this way; they went back like this. Exactly. So I think I traded that bass for the Rickenbacker. Now the Rickenbacker I think was only about $350, and it was used, had some cigarette burns on it, like any good instrument would back in that day, and it's interesting because it also had a checkerboard,
The binding. Yeah.
which was very rare. I remember looking online, you know, Schecter, before Schecter became the company that we know them today, they used to be kind of a parts company. You could buy a neck, a body, you could buy the pickups, the pick guard, and you would basically buy all this stuff and put together a guitar. It was like a kit, right? And of course, I'd read Eddie Van Halen made guitars like this, you know. So I started buying parts. So I remember I bought a mirrored pickguard and put it on that Rickenbacker. And the Rickenbacker had it had that bridge cover on it, which to me made you have to play too far north up by the fingerboard, yeah, which was not a tone I wanted, or you'd have to play behind it, which I didn't like. So I literally took a pipe saw and I sawed it, and then I had to unscrew the thing and pull the thing off because I wanted it to look like Geddy Lee's, because Geddy didn't have that on there, right? So I did that, and then you could play anywhere on it. And it's funny, I have a 4003 now that I got. I did some trading with a guy on some instruments, and I said, let me get one of those back. And I realized now that I have it, it's useless to me because the way the strings go through the bridge, there's like a channel there, and you can't palm mute. You know, that's a big part of how I've now become accustomed to playing as a pick player is to palm mute, you know, with the meat of your hand on the bridge, right? And so with the Rickenbacker, you can't do that. So I'm like, I put it up for sale a couple times on my website. Nobody seems to want it, so I guess I'll keep it. And I don't know, I'll give it away or something. But it's a great bass. But you know, it's a little shorter scale too. The 4003, right?
23 something.
Yeah,
UCs,
it's a weird scale.
Yeah.
It's not a proper 34-inch like a Fender scale. So yeah, it's an odd instrument, and they definitely have a sound. And again, I just wanted to be like this and be like Geddy and, you know, all those guys.
Did you always wanted to be a bass player?
I did. It's the weirdest thing, you know, that I saw the bass here, right? And I just went, that's the coolest instrument on the stage. It's long, and I saw it in the music store, it's got the big fat strings on it. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. I didn't even know what it sounded like. I thought the distorted guitar was the bass because I'd never even heard that. Like I heard like Sweet, you know, Ballroom Blitz and stuff like that, or I'd hear some BTO songs on the radio, and I was like, which one is the bass? I don't know. So I got the bass and, you know, the EBO, and I take it home, and it doesn't sound like Kiss, and I'm very disappointed, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it sound like Firehouse and 100,000 Years, and, you know, so that was my pursuit was that. But it's interesting how my ear then, it always went toward the bass. And as much as I love guitar, and I then learned how to play guitar, I bought like a Hondo 2 Stratocaster copy.
Nice.
You know, because there weren't any Fenders around where I lived, and they were $400, which was too expensive for me. So I bought a Hondo for like, right.
They're still $400.
They're still $400. And so I bought this Hondo 2, and I put a DiMarzio humbucker in the back, kind of like Dave Murray from Iron Maiden does. You know, where he's got the humbucker in the back. And then I learned how to play guitar, and still to this day I play pretty good rhythm guitar, and I compose mostly on guitar. It's easier for me to write rock and metal stuff on guitar, and then sometimes I come up with something on bass, move it to guitar. Sometimes I come up with something on guitar, move it to bass. So it's more about creating the part and then figuring out how to execute it later.
I want to talk about "Walking Me Forever." Beautiful song. beautiful arrangement, and your voice. You were
Yeah.
singing that one.
I know.
People were surprised.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting with that song because, Dieth tunes to C,
Yeah.
right? The whole guitar's down. In fact, when I recorded it, I took a 5-string bass and I tuned it up a half step
Oh, I see.
to make the strings tighter as opposed to dropping everything where everything gets floppy. And it's very hard, I find, to record things in a dropped tuning, because the strings are flappy and the amps don't really know how to determine the note. So tuning up helped. But as far as that song goes, C has always been a very comfortable range for me, right? I'm a true baritone now at my age. I'm a G2, out of piano, I'm a G2 to a G4, right? So I'm a 2-octave baritone. And so that song, I originally, Guilherme had the lyrics, and his Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, works great with the hard death metal stuff. It was not translating so well in the cleaner stuff where he had to really enunciate the words, right? And he had this song, and it was a beautiful song, and I said, can I just take a stab at this real quick just to kind of work on some phrasing? And as he started singing it, they're like going, you're the guy to sing it. And I'm like, hey, I didn't sign up for this. I was just gonna kind of help arrange the lyrics. And as it turned out, my voice was it fit the song,
like a glove.
It's kind of like the instrument, do we use the Fender, the Rickenbacker, the Gibson, It's just grab an instrument. And, this instrument here, my voice just happened to be the best one for that song. And then same with Heavy as the Crown.
Yeah.
I wrote the lyrics for it, and so, Guilherme was just like, man, you need to sing this one. This is you're the centerpiece of how to communicate this, So, singing is an interesting thing because you're really just voice acting, right? You're telling a story. It's more than just saying the words in key, right? It's really about the character. Our singer
literally.
Tita, who's singing on the Bass Warrior tour, a lot of that same thing because he speaks Italian, right? So a lot of that is kind of working on the phrasing and somehow sort of de-Italianizing the accent, right?
Yeah.
And so that it kind of sings a little more singable, and he's great with that. He's also a vocal teacher, so it's been kind of a fun experience for he and I as the two vocal guys to work together on harmonizing and blending our voices, because that's always what it is when you start. It's just like if a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player, you have to learn how to blend. The same thing with singing. You have to learn how to blend your voices together.
That tune and Over Now both have one big thing for me in common, which are both, they sound like anthems to me.
Yeah.
Like really almost Scorpion-esque in a real good way. I love the Scorpions kind of way. Where are the anthems in 2024?
Thank you for saying that. I'm a big fan of the anthem, and it's funny you mentioned the Scorpions because they have, to me, some of the greatest rock anthems, and they're a German band, they're not an American band. Herman the German, I think the drummer, ended up writing a lot of the lyrics. Somehow he sort of keyed into an American lifestyle of the 80s, of what kind of fists in the air, rock and roll, arena rock, and I agree. I like those. People always ask me, what's your favorite song? It's like, my favorite song is the one you like the most, because when we're performing, I'm not the self-indulgent, like, oh, I have to get my art and it's like, fuck all that bullshit, It's like, I've never considered music art, ever. It's a performance, right? It's a performance on a record. You capture it, and it's a performance when you take it to the stage. It's like, to me, it's never been about art. It's about that thing in the moment. That's why we change our set list, Sometimes we'll call audibles on stage, like the first, second night or something. I was like, let's play Rebel Yell, because we did a cover of it on No Cover. Because I love that Billy Idol album, man. The first couple records I love so much, and the bass line is so great because it drives the line. It's just this, right? It's just like, just a driving line, and I love it. There's nothing virtuoso about it. It's just fucking sits right in the pocket with the drums. That, to me, is a great bass line. You know, so to me, and I've learned the virtuoso stuff and I've studied all that, but it's like, you know, at the end of the day, man, when you get on the stage, it's like whatever's connecting to the audience. To me, that's the perfect performance.
Yes.
David, I have to ask you one question about a special guy, Alice Cooper. I think he wrote a foreword to your autobiography.
He did,
to the
yeah.
first.
Yeah.
And you know, I got this today from him.
Alice for president. Yeah, let's
Alice
get
for
like a real guy
president.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right. I'm down with that. Should we start campaigning for Alice? I agree.
Of course, of course.
I agree.
I met him a few times. Very good guy.
Yeah.
What's your relationship to?
You know, Alice has really been a. You know, I mean, he has been. He's not an older brother. He's a father figure. You know, and I remember the very first time we met him, we got invited. So back in our day, most of us Metallica, you know, Anthrax, etc. We all signed to the independent labels with the hope that that would kind of farm us up into the majors, as it did. And we all signed our major label deals. And then once we signed the major deals, you know, Metallica went out with Ozzy, Anthrax went out with Iron Maiden, and we were looking for a tour, and we landed the Alice Cooper tour. And, you know, Megadeth was a different mix. We weren't your typical go out and just machine gun heavy metal. Like, there was a lot of nuances to our sound. And Alice seemed to really get us, you know, he understood. It's funny, Dave and Alice, you know, sing a lot alike, you know, it's almost like kind of talking singing, it's narrating, you know,
Yeah,
like I was
yeah.
saying earlier, it's storytelling, right? And I think Alice got that part of us. He understood that we were a very musical band, and so for whatever reason, he took a chance on us, and we were young hellraisers for sure, probably just like he was back in his early days, right? With the $1 Billion Babies, you know? And so I remember we were on the tour, almost to the end of the tour in early 1987, and he, you know, we're partying and everything. And we knew Alice was sober. He was about 4 years sober at the time and was resetting his career, the Constrictor tour. Was doing great. The arenas were filling up again. People were really back into Alice Cooper again after he'd had some time away. And you know, we're getting all fucked up and every partying after the show, and all of a sudden, you know, we get the knock, hey guys, Alice Cooper's ready to see you on the bus. We're like, oh shit, now, you know, like all hammered, like, oh my God, get it together. So we go on the bus, and, you know, hello, Mr. Cooper, you know, being all, you know, and he was wonderful, you know, he just invited us in the bus. It was after the show, I think, and he was just sitting there hanging out, and he was, you know, just very kind, and you know, he gave us the, you know, the heads up. He said, hey, I used to drink a bottle of whiskey a day, and, you know, I did all that, and, you know, it took me down. So just, you know, be careful, you know, don't, just be careful out there. So he sort of gave us that little, you know, fortuitous warning, which, you know, we've probably failed to heed immediately, but, you know, over time we did. And you know, as I corrected that course of my life and got sober some years later, you know, he was always a wonderful, you know, more than an icon, but more, you know, just like a good neighbor to us, you know, and would always take the time for us, and of course we did No More Mr. Nice Guy for the Wes Craven movie Shocker, so that kind of brought us back into his path again, and of course by that time he'd had, you know, that song Poison was huge,
Yeah.
the Trashed album was huge, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
so, you know, again at the now another peak of his career, he's sort of putting some wind in our sails to help us get restarted again, because we were coming out of our addictions, you know, we were where Alice was, you know, 10 years before, so he got it, you know, so but yeah, he's, you know, it's funny, we always joke, you know, we live about 20 minutes from each other in Phoenix, and we never see each other in Phoenix, but we always see each other at some
Around the
festival in
world.
Spain, or yeah, exactly, you know, somewhere, you know, in Belgium or something. So, no, he's I just can't say enough. Him and Cheryl, his wife, you know, have really just been great family friends, you know, to me and my family, and really to all of us in our community.
I have a fun fact about Alice Cooper. Did you know that he was pen pals with Picasso?
I did not know that.
he was. And
Me
there's-
too.
You know, he has got the he's got the funnest background. Like, I saw some video interview of him where he was telling a story about when he met Elvis at the Hyatt on Sunset, right?
The boot story.
Yeah, and he like pulls out a pistol, or you know, Elvis pulls a gun out, you know, and it's teaching him how to like take down a guy who's pointing a gun at you, right? And but yeah, no, Alice is a fantastic storyteller. I mean, that's why his radio show's great. You know, when I listen to his radio show,
Of course.
and plays great deep cuts. I mean, I heard some Gary Moore stuff, stuff I had not heard in years, and all of a sudden I'm like hearing it on Nights with Alice Cooper. You know, Alice has been very gracious to me. When I put a new record out, he will always play tracks off of my record. You know, so that's the kind of person that we need. Look, he's been to the top. He's seen and done it all. He's been to the top many times. And, you know, I've used that as a model for me, you know, to be gracious to people. I've tried to do a lot of interviews for smaller news outlets that, you know, they just want to get going, and I'll help be the wind in their sails. Because we need, you know, we all need each other, man. We need a cohesive industry and people. We don't need people tearing us apart. We need people helping pull us and keep us together.
100%. Okay, let's get this going. I got one, or maybe couple more picks I have to ask you about.
Okay.
I really like this one. You and Rex Brown.
Oh yeah, of course.
What's your take on the whole Pantera reunion thing? Have you seen them live?
Well, I did, yeah. You know, it's funny because you know, I'm kind of doing maybe a similar thing with Kings of Thrash, where I'm playing some older deep cut stuff, songs that haven't been heard or played in many years, may never get played again.
Yep.
So there's that. You know, look, Rex, of course, being, you know, an original member of the band, I think is great. You know, it's funny with Phil because I met Pantera and Phil in 1988 in Dallas, and that was on the Power Metal record. That was Phil's first album with them. And then, of course, you know, they would put out Cowboys from Hell, and the rest is history, right? And they were on tour with us during Vulgar Display, which was Countdown to Extinction. We had them out with us over here in Europe. We took them over to America and had them opening for us in these big arena tours. So, you know, watching Phil become the star that he became, you know, shaving his head and wearing the shorts, and, you know, this whole, you know, he invented a character, you know, and, you know, he and Dave would be on covers of magazines, Metal Hammer and stuff together. And so it's interesting that we were sort of this half generation before them, and then here's Phil, he's the new guy, you know. And I've seen it many times. You know, you see Ivan with Five Finger Death Punches like that. You know, you see these guys and it's relatable, man. Their fans love that. So I think with, you know, with Pantera too, it's unfortunate, obviously, with the brothers, you know, of how everything went with that. But look, at the end of the day, people want to hear those songs.
Exactly.
You know, they're iconic. I've played in, you know, all-star bands and with Phil, even Metal Allegiance and various things, you know, playing songs with Phil, and you know, it took a lot, I think, for that to kind of come back around where everybody was comfortable even doing it and talking about it and being a part of it. So I mean, you know, to me, it's like kudos to them for being able to make it all work and come together and make it about the songs and the experience, and just being able to sort of have a new experience with that legacy. I think it's very
100%.
cool. Yeah.
It's so very well done. I mean, I love how Charlie has both of Dimebag and Vinny on the bass drums.
Sure, yeah.
Which looks awesome, and I
Yeah.
think Zach starts every night with, he has his wild audio guitars out, like the SG Flying V type of
Right.
thing, but he got his one painted by the guy who painted Dimebag's guitars,
Right.
which is just that little touch.
Well, and a lot of it too is, look, everybody grew up big fans of Pantera, and you know, it's funny, Power Metal is still my album. You know, it's just like this, right? This will always be my BTO album because it's the very first one that I heard from them. So for me, Power Metal will always be my Pantera record, and I say that to people. They're like, I never even knew that record existed, right? So, you know, Zach came in at a certain point and became a Pantera fan. Charlie, of course, you know, and most people kind of learned to Pantera on Cowboys from Hell. That was sort of in a lot of people's opinion, that was their first album. To me, that was their Rust in Peace. You know, there was like 3 albums before that, you know, just like we had 3 albums before that in the 80s before Rust in Peace came out. But, you know, that's, you know, look, it's one of the greatest bands of rock and roll ever. You know,
100%.
so I'm glad that it's working out. I have to go make some music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Awesome, guys.
Thanks,
Yep.
David.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. See you.